Okay, this is Unit 3 Test Review Part 2, and I'm going to continue giving you some hints on how to work these different problems, because we had a lot of different kind of problems, and it's kind of hard to keep it all straight. So I've once again written down the formula that we had on Day 2. This is Day 2 of the notes, and then we saw this on Part 1 of the review. And remember, on these, they actually give us the midpoint, so they're giving us the answers here when I plug in for M and P, and they give me one endpoint I'm going to plug in for one of the X's and one of the Y's, and I'm going to look for the other one. So I'm going to get you started on this. So the midpoint that I'm going to plug in here, this is 10. I'm going to plug in one of the X's here, and then you do the same thing for the Y part. But then, do you remember how to get rid of this 2 on bottom? Remember, you multiply times 2 on both sides. So this 2 cancels with that 2. And what I have left is 2 times 10 is 20. And on this side, I just have 2 plus x left. I'd finish solving this by minusing the 2 on both sides, and I get 22 equals x. Remember, once you have this done, you can go ahead and do a quick graph of it, graph each one of the points you have and your endpoint, and see if they line up with the midpoint in the middle. I do have some graph paper for you, so if you want to use some graph paper, you can come and get a piece of scratch paper. These next two are exactly the same way. Be sure you're catching which one is the midpoint and which one is the endpoint and getting them in the right order. The wording's different on this because on the different questions on the test, you have to be able to read it no matter what the order and how they word it. Pause it, finish these 3. Okay, we didn't have exactly ones like these on the notes, but this just combines what we did the first 2 days. So you do know how to do this already. We just need to go back and use the formula we had on Day 1. Remember this formula? We just used it on Part 1 of the review, and now we're going to use it for this. We just need to divide out our x part and our y part. So I'm going to show you how to do it with the x part. So I'm going to use my x's here. Here are my x's. And I'm going to call one of these points A and one of these points B. So I'm just going to plug it into my formula just like I would before. I'm looking for the point that's 1/4 over. So I'm going to plug this in for A. Here's my fraction that goes in there. Here's my B minus A, 8 minus -4. Work this out. And then that's going to tell you the x coordinate of your answer to this. Then you repeat the process with the y parts to get the other part of your answer. That's all there is to these. So it's just this same formula, you just do it once for the x's and once for the y's on both of those. Pause the video and finish these up before you move on to the next part. Okay, on this part, I just want to review what we talked about on Day 3 because you do have some test questions about this. Remember that if I call this point here x1, y1, and I call this point here x2, y2, and I want to come up with what the length of this part is here, I find that by using Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. This side here is my hypotenuse. This side here would be my vertical leg. And this side here, what I need to do is find the distance from the bottom to the top. Well, at the bottom to the top, this leg right here would be y2 minus y1. And this side would be B. This side's A and this side's C from my formula. Now this side right here would be my x direction. This is my horizontal leg. And in order to find this, I would use my x coordinates, which is x2 minus x1. So then I could plug these into my formula here. If you remember when I did it the first time in class, I kind of highlighted this stuff with colors. I made my horizontal parts pink, and I made my vertical parts orange. And then the part we're looking for is the hypotenuse. So my pink part would be this part that's a horizontal. My vertical part would be this part. And I know that's c squared. well, I really don't want c squared. I really just want what c is. So I'd have to take the square root of both sides. So this side just becomes c. And this part looks like this. And this is almost our distance formula. It's just that in our distance formula we have this on the other side. Well, I can just take and move this over there from the reflexive property. And in the distance formula we call that c the distance, or d. And that's how we got the distance formula. Now you're going to use that distance formula on 7. Remember in class that I told you every time you do it, you should write the formula down. You do need to know this formula for your test, so you need to be sure you're writing it down every time. If you write it down every time you use it, it's easier to remember. Then it's just a matter of making sure you're plugging in the parts and getting them in the right area. Make sure you get the x parts put in here, and the y parts put in the second part. And other than that, the only thing you have to be super careful about is that you don't mess up your negative signs. Write them down very carefully. If you have bad handwriting, this is the time to be extra careful. Take your time. Don't miss a negative. Okay, we're still just using the distance formula on these problems. Remember on these problems that it may help you to actually draw a graph out. I do have some graph paper where you can draw some graphs and actually do these. And remember on this one, the perimeter means I need to find every side of this triangle. So I need to find all 3 sides and then add up the sides to get the answer. On these, I'm just finding the distance of those two. Work all these with the distance formula and then pause the video and then move on to the next part. Our last section here, well, this section, we have one more, I guess, is where I'm looking for one of the endpoints. So they gave me a coordinate, and we're looking for a missing part. This is just like the notes we did on day 3. Remember, this means that AB is equal to DE, so I really do suggest that you take and draw these points out here on a graph so that you can see what you're looking for. First, you're going to have to find the length of AB using the distance formula. So work that out, find the length of AB. Once you know what AB is, then you know that's also the length of DE. So set DE equal to the same thing. And then remember, we plugged each one of the answers, and you can see some multiple choice answers on the Google form, in for what our point is that's missing. We're missing point E, and I know the x value of point E is 4, so I can write E like this, 4, W, where I'm looking for this y value right here. Pause, work that problem out. If you don't remember this one, I do have this worked out on day 3 completely on the notes. You may want to go back and look at that one where I worked that one out on your notes. This one is very similar to it, but here they tell me how long FG is. So I know that FG is equal to the distance formula, write it all out. And then I can take and say that this, if I square the 13, I know the square root of 169 is equal to the distance formula. So I know 169 is equal to what you had inside here. Then you can plug this into your calculator and find the W. Do notice that it tells us that W is greater than 0, so I'm going to have to just choose the one that's positive or negative. Well, if it's greater than 0, that means I'm just going to choose the positive answer. Then this one is like the one we did up there. Again, if you don't remember how to do these, go back and look at day 3 video, and it's part 2 on that day, and you can see where I worked out the one that was on our notes. It's exactly like 11 and 13. Then at the bottom, once you finish all those, at the bottom we have these that we had on day 3, and these were actually the super easy ones. Remember, you just write your distance formula all the way out, copy your distance formula all the way out, and then plug these values in for all the values there. You don't have to reduce these, you're just picking the one that matches. Those really should be some of the easiest questions on the test.